So you've probably heard about the deep desert and wondered what it's all about. Well, in today's video, we're going to be discussing just that. It's going to be the final endgame content of Dune Awakening, and it's going to be this massive area that you can access from the world map, and this is going to be essentially where you're going to be able to find the best loot and the best rare resources, which is only going to be obtainable in this area. Now, when you do venture to the deep desert, you're going to only be able to access it with a flying vehicle. That's the first thing you're going to need to know about the deep desert. You need to have an ornithopter or an assault helicopter or something that can fly in order to take you there. And the way you access it is going to be by going to the outskirts of the map, flying towards the invisible barrier, although it is kind of slightly visible. And if you go towards it, it will ask you if you want to exit to the world map. This will then take you to the world map. And if you fly towards the top left-hand corner of the world map, you will see a massive zone called the deep desert. Now, when you see this zone, it's important to note, you will see 3 rectangular blocks, and these rectangular blocks are going to determine which quadrant you're going to land in when you appear on the deep desert. Now, you're going to have to make sure that you're well prepared before you come here, because this place is going to be mostly 90% of it is PvP, and the PvP content that is going to be there is going to be a lot more challenging, and I mean a lot more challenging than what you used to on Hager Basin. So make sure you do end up coming here prepared. It's going to be mostly open sand. There's going to be a lot fewer places or like islands to land on or to go to. There are still going to be there, but they're going to be quite few and far between. And it's going to be obviously quite a dangerous place, the most dangerous place in the game. So make sure when you come here, you have plenty of fuel. Make sure your vehicle is fully repaired. Make sure you have water supplies. Make sure you have extra fuel for your vehicles, obviously. Make sure that you have everything that you need, including good gear, because you're definitely going to need it. And you could be here for a while, because to explore this place is going to take a lot of time since it is an incredibly big area. So let's talk about what there is to do in the deep desert, why you want to come here, and how you can get the things you need to get without getting into any trouble. Now, it is also important to note, if you do end up dying in the deep desert, let's say you lose your helicopter and you die in the deep desert, you might be stranded here because you cannot leave the deep desert without a helicopter unless you use the game's fast travel system, which will allow you to, when you die, to spawn back in Hager Basin. But upon doing so, you'll drop everything on your person, which means you'll spawn back in Hager Basin with nothing. So keep that in mind. That's also a very important thing to note. So this is why you want to start making use of forward bases. And when I say a forward base, you typically want to build a small structure. There is going to be a zone when you first spawn in on the deep desert that's going to be PvE. The way the deep desert structure is going to look is essentially there is going to be certain quadrants, and they're going to be marked kind of like a chessboard. You're going to get A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, and it's going to go all the way, I believe, up to 10. And then after that, the next zone, it's going to go B1, B2, B3. All the A blocks or the initial blocks is going to be PvE. So you're safe here. Build bases here. Don't build extravagant, high-tech, advanced bases. Build something where you can maybe park a vehicle in. Build something where you can put some refineries or put some basic stuff in. It's also worth noting that everything you build here is going to be half price. And when you destroy it, you will get back full price. So in other words, if you build something, you can actually build at a discounted rate. Maybe you want to build a spice refinery that you otherwise can't use, but you can craft it for half price in the deep desert. And then when it's time to leave, you can destroy it and you can get back full resources for it. Not full resources in terms of getting more than what you put in, but full in terms of it's 50% you put in and it's 50% you get back. That's important to note. The deep desert is going to be structured in a way that is going to be, like I said, like a giant chessboard, so to speak. And the deeper that you go in, the increased amount of loot you're going to find. There's going to be 2 resources specifically that you really want to pick up here. That's going to be titanium ore and stravidium mass. Now, these 2 resources are going to require that you have a cut array of Mark 5 quality or better, so it's going to be unobtainable in the early game. These resources are also going to be able to find more and more abundantly as you go deep into the desert. You'll notice when you first go into the deep desert, you will see some islands, those rocky islands where you can travel to. And those will be mostly full of things like copper and aluminium, nothing too special. You might see 1 or 2 titanium ore nodes or stravidium mass nodes, but it'll be quite rare in the early stages. As you venture further into the deep desert, into quadrants maybe C and D, you'll start seeing more and more of these resources until you get to the very far end of the desert, and then you'll start seeing it pretty much everywhere. It's also worth noting that the deeper you go, it's going to be more dangerous because you can't exit very easily. The only way to get out of the deep desert, you've got to fly all the way back to the zone where you came from and go to the wall in which you'll be able to travel back to the world map, which means that if you go very deep into the desert, you're going to have a very long return journey. And it is quite deep. I mean, I think that the furthest I went into it was 21 kilometers deep into it. I think you can go a little bit further than that. And it's 21 square kilometers. Also is very wide, obviously. So there's a lot of open area, and it is actually quite scary when you're there, especially especially considering the fact that other players will likely kill you when they see you, since everyone is competing for very rare resources in the zone. Speaking of rare resources, one of the most important resources that you're going to be able to obtain from the deep desert is going to be spice. Now, spice you're going to be able to find in quite a big abundance. However, there are going to be different tiers of spice fields. Now, you're going to see the typical ones you're used to. The small ones are typically going to give you about 500 spice. You know, they're going to do the typical thing. They're going to be a loud explosion noise. You're going to see a small cloud indicating that it is going to be spawning there. And, you know, for the most part, these aren't going to be contested too much by players, especially when it comes to bigger guilds. They're not really interested in these smaller nodes. So it's likely you can get these without too much contention from other players. You're going to notice also slightly bigger ones. They're going to give you a couple of thousand spice per node. So these ones are going to be a lot bigger, and they're going to typically be 1 or 2 runs in order to harvest them all and then get out. Then the next one you're going to get is the one that I've seen is typically going to give you about 10,000-ish spice. I think it could be a little bit more depending on what compactor you end up using. Then you're going to see the really big one, which is going to be a massive crater looking thing on the map, and it's going to give you a lot of spice if you do end up seeing it filled. I don't even know how much spice you can obtain from this. I've seen reports of people say they've been mining it for hours and only got like 40,000 spice, and it looks like they're still not even a quarter of the way done. So I'm not even sure. It looks like it might be like 200,000 spice there potentially. It's an insane amount, far more than one person can carry. And as you can imagine, when these things do spawn, the whole server goes bananas, and anyone there is going to want to try take control of this. So you can imagine this is where the big guilds and the big alliances are going to be fighting over for these resources. Now, it is quite dangerous to mine these, so you got to watch out. You're going to have a big chance of running into other players. And if they see you mining on their turf, they're going to open fire on you, and they're likely not going to be willing to share. So keep that in mind. It is a dangerous place to be. Also, another important thing to note is there is going to be some spice fields which are going to have like a weird bubbling animation. You won't be able to harvest spice from them. You'll see when you fly closer, you'll see kind of like these little bubbly formations on the ground. This is going to indicate there is going to soon be a spice field that will erupt here. Now, how long it takes for this to actually occur, I don't know for sure. It is going to take some time. When I saw this, I did see one, and even 20 minutes later, I believe, I still saw it bubbling. So it does give a warning quite far in advance that there's going to be a spice field here. So keep that in mind as well. Also, it's worth noting that when it comes to the biggest spice fields, you're going to see even bigger eruptions in the sky. Some of the bigger ones, the eruptions are going to last for several minutes. So it's going to be a big indication to other players, which you can see from large distances away, that there are spice fields there. So it is difficult sometimes to find spice fields where no one else notices, because they try and make it very obvious where the spice ends up erupting so that players can find it. Now, there's also plenty of other resources to find in the deep desert as well. There's going to be fallen ships, and these are going to behave just like the ones you see in Hager Base, and there's going to be like these downed aircraft which are going to be on fire, and after a while Sandworms will eat them, so watch out for that. But if you do end up going to them, they're going to have a lot better loot than you typically are used to in the world map. They're going to have schematics for some very high-end blueprints for weapons and vehicles, which are going to be far better than the ones you're going to find in the homeworld. They're also going to have resources, typically crafting components like machinery or pumps and a bunch of other things that are only going to be obtainable through the deep desert variants of these crash ships. So you're going to want to make sure you loot these, because again, you're going to get very rare schematics, and you're also going to end up be able to find resources you can need for crafting some of the later items in the game. It is also worth noting most of the resources you find in the desert are going to be needed to craft the final tier of weaponry and vehicles. You'll notice the game is typically divided into different tiers of gear. It's going to be copper, then it's going to be iron or steel, then it's going to move on to aluminium, then it's going to move on to dura-aluminium, and then it's going to move on to plastanium, and that is going to be the final tier of things to unlock. Now, most of these things are going to require combinations of all these resources you're going to find in the deep desert, things like titanium, things like all the various machine parts and pumps and whatnot, all going to find this stuff in the deep desert. But it is going to obviously be somewhat dangerous, because not only do you have to deal with sandworms, but if you're looting one of these ships and again another player spots you, they might not be too happy, they might not be willing to share, and they might just down you with their attack helicopter if they do end up seeing you. So watch out for that. It's also worth noting when you do end up coming to deep desert, you're typically going to want to make sure that your ornithopter has storage units on it, because you won't be able to harvest, especially if you're playing solo, without the storage capacity, because you're going to be getting these resources without any way to put them. You're not going to be able to get much success. And that's another reason why I like to build a forward base, because if you do have a forward base on the deep desert, you can kind of land there, unload some stuff into it, especially put in the PvE zone, and then go right back out and kind of keep doing these runs over and over again. You have a little base where you can be safe from when it comes to enemies in the deep desert. It's also very important to note that when you do end up building in the deep desert, there is going to be a weekly cycle. So every week there's going to be this massive event called the Corola storm, and that is going to be this huge, I think, solar flare event that is going to wipe out the deep desert, and it's going to destroy all structures, everything that's there will be wiped out. So you do not want to be here when it hits. The game will warn you several hours in advance and keep warning you every hour. So make sure when it is time for the Coriolis storm to hit, get all your stuff out of the base, because whatever's left behind will get destroyed. There's also going to be a shifting sands event that's going to follow, and they're going to then restructure the map. It's going to reset all the loot, and it's going to give a slightly different map each time. I don't know how many maps there are going to be like this. The devs haven't been very clear in regards to how many maps or variations of the maps are going to be, but it's also going to give you new pools of loot to get, so to speak. So every week there's going to be new types of gear, new types of schematics that are going to like rotate between themselves. So one week you might be able to get a certain armor piece or a certain engine for a helicopter or something that you can only find in this deep desert, and then the next week that might no longer be possible to find, and instead you'll find maybe a blueprint for a sword or a blueprint for whatever that will rotate through the cycle. So that's also a big reason why you want to keep visiting the deep desert, because this is where you're going to find the absolute best loot and also rare schematics that's going to allow you to build higher tier versions of even the highest tier weapons that you can possibly build. It's also worth noting the sandstorms in the deep desert are going to be a lot bigger. You're going to typically see they're going to be of a bigger magnitude, and you will notice this when you see there'll be a little number above them. In Hacker Basin, it's going to be a little number 1. In the deep desert, they're typically going to be number 3. And these sandstorms are also going to have like lightning strikes as well. So you're going to want to make sure you take cover when they come, and it can be difficult to do so because it's not going to be very well covered areas. If you do end up seeing any like kind of like land formations, check to see if there's going to be some kind of like rocky archway. Those are typically going to be fairly safe. You can land your vehicle under them and you can wait it out. Those are going to give you enough protection typically to survive the sandstorm. That's going to be your best bet if you can't get back to base. Now, there's going to be other elements as well to explore in the deep desert. Similar to the Hager Basin, there's going to be these big down ships. They're going to be like these giant down spaceships that are going to be kind of sitting there. They're going to be filled with enemies, and they're going to be quite dangerous to do. Unlike the ones in Hager Basin, these enemies are very high level. When I say very high level, I have a shotgun that can literally one-shot every single enemy in Hager Basin very easily and very consistently. But when I go to the deep desert, most of these enemies here take several, if not 10 shots to die just one single basic enemy. Not to mention, most of them are going to have shields. They're going to be heavy gunners. They're going to have flamethrowers, which is going to make my gun useless against them. And when it comes to your blade, you're going to need to have like 3 or 4 heavy hits to kill one of them. And then on top of that, when there's multiple enemies coming at you with shields, it becomes very difficult. Now, when you do end up going into these facilities, especially the Imperial testing facilities, they're going to typically have the certain zone where the doors are going to lock on you, and you're going to have to fight wave after wave after wave of enemy. Now, the amount of waves you have to fight, I believe, is random. Sometimes you might only have to fight 1 wave. Sometimes you'll have to fight several waves. It becomes very difficult, and it becomes an endurance battle. Every wave becomes increasingly more difficult to deal with because you're going to start having your weapons are going to get damaged, your armor is going to get damaged, your weapon durability is going to go down, you're going to run out of ammo, healing, all that kind of stuff. It's going to become very, very difficult. And once you clear out these, you're going to find loot that is going to be some of the best loot in the game. It's going to have unique weapon schematics. It's going to have a lot of gear and also a lot of resources that are going to be needed to crafting the endgame content. Now, it's recommended that you come here with groups of people, since it'll be a lot easier if you have friends. You can do it solo, of course, but it's going to be a lot harder. So make sure that you are over prepared rather than under prepared here, because it's not going to be easy if you do end up coming here. Now, in terms of PvP and how I like to collect spice, because spice is what you're going to be here for the most, especially because spice is needed to make spice melang, and spice melang is going to be required for most crafting recipes when it comes to the endgame content. So you're going to be wanting to get a lot of it. Now, the big difference between spice and the other resources is spice kind of indicates on the map where it is. Whenever there's a spice field that erupts, it is going to have like a big purple cloud, and it's going to show everyone on the map where it is. So those are going to be points of contention. Whereas when it comes to other resources, you can kind of safely gather them for the most part. People won't typically bother you. Yeah, people don't actively want to fight for no reason. People aren't going to go out of their way to fight you. I'd say 80% of people are going to be somewhat reasonable. They're not going to want to fight for no reason, especially considering the fact that there's a risk for them too. If you fight back, there's kind of like a 50-50 chance they're going to die, and people aren't going to want to die because they're going to lose their helicopters, and it's a lot of time to rebuild one of these. People aren't going to want to fight for no reason. However, when it comes to spice sand, people are going to probably fight because they are trying to protect their turf. So the way I like to do it when you're playing solo is there's 2 very efficient ways to do this. In the early mornings, or maybe very late in the evenings if you can play at that time, you're going to see there's going to be obviously less server activity. If you're playing on Europe servers, whatever time is early in the morning for Europe, you're probably going to see less players, especially on weekdays. People have to go to work, people have to go to school, and you're probably going to be a lot less players, so you can do this more safely in the early hours of the morning or in the very late hours of the evening. Maybe you're at night owl, you're playing at 4 a.m., you'll probably see less players playing at that time. The other strategy I like to make use of is when you're playing solo is you do want to make sure you don't go for the biggest pile of spice you can see, especially ones where you can see there are holes in it. If you see a massive crate of spice and you see plenty of little gaps where people have been harvesting it, that obviously means that other people know where it is and other people are actively making runs to collect it. If you are collecting spice while they're at base and they're coming back and they see you there, they're probably going to shoot you when they see you, and you're not going to be able to defend yourself, especially if you're playing solo and they're in a team. So the way I like to do it especially is look out for the map. Look where you see the big clouds of purple smoke when it comes to the like explosions or eruptions that indicate spice, and put a marker on it. Don't go to it immediately, put a marker there. Right, carry on doing what you're doing, go harvest some other resources, and maybe in 20 minutes later or half an hour later, go check out that marker, find the spice field, and if you see that no one has harvested when the purple cloud is gone and it appears as if no one knows it's there, that's when you harvest it, because if no one is actively harvesting it, there's a good chance no one knows that it exists except for you. This is especially valuable in the deeper part of the desert because it's a very big map, so it's hard for everyone to explore everything. There are going to be lots of like blind spots and places where people aren't going to see. You're kind of like a little speck of dust in the grand scheme of things. It's a huge map. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of sneak by with people not detecting you. If there is a big spice field or a medium-sized spice field that only you know about, then you go crazy. Then you go and harvest as much of it as you can. And you can typically come back with 3 or 4 or 5 runs of this and get a lot of spice without anyone interrupting you. And that is going to be the best strategy for solo because you won't have to fight people as often if you do this strategy. Again, don't go for the biggest spice field that's in the center of the map where everyone is obviously actively hunting and trying to gather. Rather go for the ones where you know that people haven't seen because you put a marker there, you've checked it out half an hour after it spawned, and you see that still after half an hour, no one has harvested from it. That means that pretty much no one knows about it. Obviously, there's still a risk someone just stumbles across it and they might just shoot you. That obviously is going to be a risk, but it's less likely to happen. Now, if you really have to engage in PvP, if you are going to engage in PvP, you need to have rockets on your Ornithopter. That's just the meta right now. Ornithopter rockets are just OP, and they're going to be pretty much your only way of defending yourself if you do end up going to PvP. So if you really want to go in PvP, you're going to want to come with an Ornithopter with rocket launchers on it. But again, this is going to be quite difficult solo because a lot of other people are going to come with groups, and it's not going to be a very safe thing because if you do fight with someone that also has rockets on their Ornithopter, it's practically going to be at best a 50-50 if you win or lose. Now, if you really want to kill someone and you don't know how to go about it, there are ways you can ambush people. If you see a spice field and there is bits and holes missing, you could maybe hide behind a rock and maybe use your storage device to store your vehicle, and it's kind of be sneaky. Wait there, maybe hide with binoculars, wait till someone goes to the spice field, and the second someone dismounts their helicopter and starts harvesting, you could swoop in and ambush them, potentially kill them. However, be very careful if you go about doing it this way, because people that die like this aren't going to be happy. They might come back for revenge, and they might have alliances, they might have guilds that are going to then also seek you out and try kill you. So I wouldn't recommend going that route, but maybe someone's pissed you off, maybe someone's killed you and you want revenge, you could maybe go about doing it that way. Other than that, it is going to be a place where you are going to find an abundance of very endgame resources. There are also going to be Imperial testing stations, which are going to be easier to do. They're still going to be much harder than the ones in Hager Basin, but they won't be as difficult as the ones in the open deserts. You'll notice there's going to be like this kind of huge rock formation, like a cliff, that is going to be the safe zone, the PvE zone, and then there's going to be the PvP zone. In the PvE zone, there will still be Imperial testing facilities there. They won't be as difficult as the ones in the deep desert because they won't have those waves of enemies, but they will obviously give you some resources that you'll only be able to obtain from the end game. You're going to need these to craft a lot of the things in the game as well. So if there is a resource, especially on the higher tier of weapons that you don't know how to get, there's a good chance you're going to be able to get it either by Imperial testing facility, one in the deep desert, or the PvE zone, depending on how rare the resource is. Downship, or the massive giant downship that you also end up potentially seeing in the deep desert, and that's going to be how you farm these rare items. Now again, the deep desert is going to be a dangerous area, so make sure that you do end up coming prepared. You don't want to be caught off guard here. And for the love of all things, please make sure you bring fuel, because if you do not want to get stranded out here in the deep desert, that will be almost impossible to get back from. I don't even think land vehicles are going to survive down the deep desert, considering how big the gaps can be between the different like little islands to hop to. So you're going to need to have a helicopter, and make sure you bring extra fuel with you. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section below if there's any other tips or any other information about the deep desert which you know about that I might have not mentioned in the video. I'd love to find out, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.